I am Clarissa, 25 years old, and the oldest of 3 kids in my family. I never imagined I would come home from work to find all my possessions stuffed into garbage bags at the front gate. My mother stood there with my younger sister and brother, her face cold and unforgiving. "You're 25, get out now," she declared. I just smiled, loaded everything into my car, and drove away without saying a word. Before I share what happened after I drove away, let me know where you're watching from and tap that subscribe button if you've ever had to start your life over unexpectedly. I grew up in a middle-class family in a small town in Pennsylvania. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where I spent countless hours playing as a child. Life was relatively normal until I turned 12. That was when everything changed. My father David was driving home from work one rainy night when another car lost control and crashed into him. He died instantly. His death shattered our family. My mother Catherine was suddenly a single parent to 3 children. I was the oldest at 12. Madison was 9 and Jordan was just 6. Mum had been a high school English teacher for years, but after Dad died, the burden of being the sole provider weighed heavily on her. As the oldest child, I quickly learned that I was expected to step up. "Clarissa, you need to be more responsible now," Mum would say. "I need your help with Madison and Jordan." At first, I didn't mind. I loved my siblings and wanted to help during this difficult time. But as months turned into years, I noticed a shift in how my mother treated us. Madison and Jordan were allowed to be children, to make mistakes, to need comfort. I was expected to be a mini adult. By 14, I was cooking dinner most nights, helping the younger ones with homework, and doing the majority of household chores. "You're so mature for your age," Mum would tell me as if it was a compliment rather than a burden placed on me. When I turned 16 and got my driver's license, my responsibilities expanded. I became the family chauffeur, taking Jordan to soccer practice and Madison to dance lessons. I had wanted to join the photography club at school, but there was simply no time between my duties at home and maintaining my grades. Around this time, Mum started dating again. Patrick entered our lives when I was 17. He was a bank manager, financially stable and eager to be part of a ready-made family. At first I was hopeful. Maybe having another adult around would ease some of the pressure on me. I was wrong. Patrick had very traditional views about family dynamics. He believed children should be seen and not heard, especially female children. He and Mum would go out for dinner while I stayed home to babysit, even though Madison was 14 and perfectly capable of watching herself and Jordan. "Clarissa needs to learn responsibility," Patrick would say, and Mum would nod in agreement. Meanwhile, Madison was becoming increasingly spoiled. Mum and Patrick would buy her new clothes and the latest phone, while I was told to be grateful for hand-me-downs because money doesn't grow on trees. The double standard became even more apparent as we got older. When Madison wanted to go to a party, Mum would drop everything to drive her. When I asked for a ride to the library to study, I was told to take the bus. "You're older, you need to be more independent," Mum would say. Jordan, as the only boy and the baby of the family, was the most privileged of all. By the time he was 13, he had more video games than he could play, a bedroom twice the size of mine. He took over the master bedroom when Patrick moved in, and 0 responsibilities around the house. Boys will be boys. Patrick would laugh when Jordan left his dirty dishes on the table or his sports equipment scattered across the living room. If I left so much as a textbook on the coffee table, I was lectured about respect and cleanliness. As high school graduation approached, I dreamed of going away to college. I had good grades and had been accepted to several schools, including one with a respected photography program 3 states away. I had secretly applied, hoping that a scholarship might make it possible. The night I tried to discuss it with Mum and Patrick was the first time I saw how determined they were to keep me in my place. "Photography? That's not a real career, Clarissa," Patrick scoffed. "What about Madison and Jordan? Who will help me with them if you're so far away?" Mum added, as if I was suggesting abandoning toddlers rather than teenagers. "Besides, we can't afford out-of-state tuition," Patrick concluded, even though he had just bought a new sports car the previous month. I ended up enrolling in the local community college, later transferring to the state university 30 minutes from home. I majored in accounting because Patrick said it was sensible and would lead to a real job. I still lived at home, still cooked and cleaned, still played chauffeur to my siblings. I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that once Madison and Jordan were a bit older, I could finally start living my own life. but deep down I was beginning to realize I was trapped in a role my family had no intention of letting me escape. College life for me wasn't about wild parties or finding myself. It was about balancing classes with family obligations and working enough hours to pay for my education. Unlike many of my classmates who received financial support from their parents, I was on my own when it came to tuition and books. I worked at a coffee shop near campus from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., attended classes until 3 p.m., then worked at a bookstore until closing time at 9 p.m. After that, I would go home, make sure the kitchen was clean, and stay up until midnight, or later studying. Weekends weren't for recovery, they were for catching up on household chores and helping Jordan with his homework, since Mum and Patrick were usually busy with their own activities. "Look at Clarissa," Mum would tell relatives at family gatherings. "Such a hard worker." She said it with pride, as if my exhaustion was an achievement she could take credit for. What she didn't mention was that despite working 2 jobs, 75% of my earnings went straight to the family fund that Patrick managed. Meanwhile, Madison graduated high school and was sent off to an expensive private university 5 hours away. "We want to give her the best opportunity," Mum explained, when I questioned why Madison deserved what I had been denied. Mum covered Madison's rent for an off-campus apartment, bought her a new laptop, and sent her a generous monthly allowance. When Madison came home for breaks, she was treated like visiting royalty. Mum would cook her favourite meals, Patrick would slip her extra spending money, and I was expected to handle her laundry because she's so busy catching up with her friends. Jordan dropped out of high school during his senior year, claiming that traditional education wasn't for him. Rather than being held accountable, he was allowed to stay home playing video games while vaguely talking about starting a streaming channel someday. He contributed nothing to the household, not money, not labour, not even basic courtesy. If I dared to suggest he pick up after himself, I was scolded for creating conflict. It was during my final year of college that I met Jessica. We were partnered for a project in our business ethics class, and she invited me to study at her apartment. I was shocked when I arrived. Jessica lived alone in a small but clean apartment decorated with photos she had taken herself. She made decisions without consulting anyone. She ate when she was hungry, slept when she was tired, and spent her money as she saw fit. "Don't you live with your family?" I asked, trying to understand how she had achieved this independence. "I did until sophomore year," she explained. "But my parents recognized I was an adult and encouraged me to experience living on my own." The concept was so foreign to me that I actually laughed. When Jessica asked about my living situation, I found myself telling her everything. It was the first time I had verbalized the inequity in my family. Jessica didn't dismiss my concerns or tell me I was being dramatic. Instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Clarissa, what they're doing isn't normal or healthy. They're taking advantage of you." It was like a light switched on. I had always felt something was wrong, but having someone else validate those feelings made them impossible to ignore. Jessica became my closest friend, the one person in my life who saw me as an individual rather than an extension of my family's needs. With Jessica's encouragement, I focused on finishing my degree with honours, hoping that professional success might be my ticket to freedom. I was hired immediately after graduation by a local accounting firm. The starting salary wasn't extraordinary, but it was enough that I should have been able to afford my own place. Should have been, if not for my family's expectations. The day I received my first paycheck, Mum and Patrick sat me down for a family meeting. Madison was away at school and Jordan was nowhere to be seen, so it was really just the two of them informing me of my new financial obligations. "Now that you have a real job, you'll contribute 60% of your income to household expenses," Patrick stated, as if it was already decided, "plus your usual share of groceries and utilities." When I pointed out that this would leave me with barely enough to save anything, Mum looked offended. "After everything we've done for you, providing a roof over your head all these years," I wanted to argue that most parents don't expect compensation for basic childcare, but the confrontation wasn't worth it. So I agreed, but secretly opened a separate bank account where I deposited a small portion of each paycheck. It wasn't much, but it gave me a tiny sense of control. Patrick moved in permanently around this time, though he maintained his own house as a rental property. With him came even more rigid expectations of my role in the family. He treated me like a live-in maid, leaving dirty dishes in the sink with comments like, "Clarissa will take care of it." If I was 5 minutes late starting dinner, he would make passive-aggressive remarks about reliability and responsibility. Mum never defended me. In fact, she seemed to welcome having someone else to enforce the unspoken rule that my needs came last. The dynamic was becoming more toxic by the day, but I still couldn't see a way out. My secret savings were growing too slowly, and the thought of leaving the only home I knew was terrifying. Jessica would regularly invite me to her apartment for dinner, providing brief escapes from my situation. "You know you can always crash on my couch if things get too bad," she offered more than once. I always thanked her but declined. Despite everything, I felt obligated to my family. They had convinced me so thoroughly that they needed me, that without my contribution, everything would fall apart. It was a heavy responsibility, one that kept me chained to a situation that was slowly crushing my spirit. What I didn't realize then was that chains can be broken, and sometimes life forces your hand when you're too afraid to make the first move yourself. The shift began with a simple email congratulating me on my 2-year work anniversary. My supervisor called me into her office on a Tuesday morning, and I felt a flutter of anxiety. Was I in trouble? Had I made a mistake on one of the tax returns I had processed? "Clarissa, your work has been exceptional," she began, instantly relieving my worry. "We'd like to offer you a promotion to senior accountant with a 20% salary increase." For a moment, I couldn't speak. This was significant, not just professionally, but personally. With this increase, I could potentially save enough to move out within 6 months, even with my family's financial demands. I accepted on the spot and spent the rest of the day in a rare state of optimism. That evening, I decided to share the good news at dinner. It was a mistake. 20% increase, that's wonderful, Mum said initially, and for a brief moment, I thought she was genuinely happy for me. Then Patrick cleared his throat. "So we'll adjust the household contribution accordingly. With the increased responsibility at work, you'll probably be too busy to help as much around the house, so the additional financial support will offset that." Just like that, my achievement was co-opted. It wasn't my success, it was a family resource to be redistributed. I nodded and excused myself early from dinner, retreating to my room, where I made a decision. I wouldn't tell them the exact amount of my raise. I would continue to contribute the same dollar amount I had been allowing me to save the difference. For 6 months, I lived a double life. At home, I was the same dependable Clarissa, cooking, cleaning, and handing over my entire paycheck, minus what I needed for basic expenses. But I was secretly putting aside the additional 20% from my raise, along with whatever I could squeeze from my regular budget. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, had my pay stub sent to my email rather than mailed to the house, and began researching apartments in areas that would be convenient to my workplace, but far enough from home to discourage drop-ins. My 25th birthday arrived during this period of secret planning. I woke up expecting at least a cursory acknowledgement, perhaps a card, or a small gift. There was nothing. Mum and Patrick left for work without saying a word, and Jordan was still asleep as usual. I tried not to feel hurt as I got ready for work. Maybe they were planning something for the evening, I reasoned. A small dinner or cake after I got home. I checked my phone throughout the day, but there were no messages from my family. Madison, away at graduate school, didn't call or text either. The only person who remembered was Jessica. She sent me a birthday message first thing in the morning and insisted on taking me to dinner after work. "It's your 25th, she said. "That's a milestone. We have to celebrate." We went to a nice restaurant, the kind my family would consider unnecessarily expensive. Jessica ordered champagne and made a toast to my future. After dinner, she handed me a beautifully wrapped package. Inside was a professional quality digital camera. Not the most expensive model on the market, but far more advanced than anything I had ever used in my high school photography class. "Jessica, this is too much," I protested, knowing how much it must have cost. "It's not too much for my best friend," she insisted. "Besides, you need to start pursuing your passion again. 25 is too young to give up on your dreams." I was so touched I nearly cried. Someone had seen me, really seen me, and cared enough to encourage the part of myself I had been forced to suppress for so long. We took silly selfies with my new camera, laughing and enjoying the evening so much that I lost track of time. It was after 10 when I finally arrived home, still smiling from the first genuine celebration I had experienced in years. The house was surprisingly active for that hour. Lights were on in the living room and I could hear multiple voices. Curious, I walked in to find Mom, Patrick, Madison, and Jordan gathered around a cake decorated with congratulations written in frosting. Madison saw me first. "Oh, you're finally home," she said without enthusiasm. "What's the occasion?" I asked, confused by the celebration that clearly wasn't for my birthday. Madison got accepted into the master's program at Columbia, Mum announced proudly. Full scholarship, we're so proud. That's wonderful, I said automatically, though I felt a stab of pain. Not only had they forgotten my birthday, but they were celebrating Madison's achievement on the same day. We tried to wait, but you were out so late, Patrick added with a hint of disapproval. There's cake if you want some. I stood there, my new camera still in its bag, feeling invisible in my own home. I actually had dinner with Jessica, I said. For my birthday. There was an awkward pause. Is that today? Mum looked genuinely confused, which somehow hurt more than if she had intentionally forgotten. I'm sorry, honey, with all the excitement about Madison's news, it slipped my mind. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Congratulations, Madison. Columbia is impressive. Thanks, she replied, barely looking up from her phone, where she was undoubtedly sharing her news with friends who would properly appreciate it. I turned to leave the room, but Patrick's voice stopped me. Since you're here, Clarissa, we wanted to discuss something with you. Madison will need to move to New York for this program, and it's expensive to live there even with the scholarship covering tuition. I knew where this was heading. You want me to contribute to her living expenses, I stated flatly. Just temporarily, Mum assured me. Family helps family. I looked around at their faces, all expecting me to agree without question, as I always had. Something inside me finally snapped. When has this family ever helped me? I asked quietly. The room went silent. Excuse me. Patrick was the first to recover his tone, warning me not to continue, but I was done being silenced. I worked 2 jobs through college while living here and still paid rent. I cook, I clean, I contribute most of my salary. When has anyone in this family made a sacrifice for me? We gave you a home, Mum exclaimed, clearly shocked by my outburst. A home where I'm treated like staff, not family, I replied. Did you know today is my birthday? Did any of you remember or care? Jordan had the decency to look embarrassed, but Madison rolled her eyes. Drama queen much. It's just a birthday. It's not just about the birthday, I tried to explain, my voice shaking with emotion. It's about years of being treated differently, of having different expectations placed on me, of watching both of you get opportunities and support that were denied to me. That's ridiculous, Mum dismissed. We've always treated all our children equally. When was the last time you paid for anything for me? I challenged. My education, my clothes, even a meal at a restaurant. Yet you're planning to support Madison in New York after already paying for her undergraduate degree. And Jordan lives here completely free, contributing nothing. Patrick stood up, his face reddening with anger. You are being selfish and ungrateful. After everything your mother has done raising you as a single parent. She raised all 3 of us as a single parent. I interrupted, something I had never dared to do before. But only I was expected to become a co-parent at 12. I think you should go to your room and calm down, Mum said, in the tone she used to use when I was a child. I'm 25 years old, I replied. You don't get to send me to my room anymore. Patrick stepped closer, using his height to intimidate me, as he often did. This is my house now, and in my house you will respect your mother. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my continued courage. My name is on the lease too. Dad made sure of that when he refinanced before he died. This house belongs to all 4 of us. This was news to Patrick, and I could see him processing this information with growing anger. Well, that's going to change, he finally said. Your mother and I are getting married next month, and we're going to restructure things. The house will be in our names only. Mum looked almost apologetic, but she nodded in agreement. We were going to tell you this weekend. We'll need your room for other purposes. What other purposes? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Patrick's son from his first marriage might be moving in, Mum admitted. He's 17 and having some troubles at home with his mother, so I was being replaced. A male child, Patrick's biological child, was being given priority over me. Of course. I see, I said, suddenly feeling very calm. The pieces were all falling into place, and for the first time, I saw my family clearly. And when were you planning to tell me I needed to find a new place to live? We thought you might want to look for an apartment closer to your work anyway, Mum said, trying to make it sound like they were doing me a favour. You've mentioned the commute is challenging. I had mentioned that exactly once years ago. It was stunning how they could selectively remember things that suited their narrative while forgetting something as basic as my birthday. I need some air, I said, turning to leave before I said something I would regret. Clarissa, don't be dramatic, Madison called after me. We're talking about my future here. I didn't respond. I walked out the front door and sat on the porch steps, taking deep breaths of the cool night air. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Hope the rest of your birthday is going well. Let me know if you want to have lunch tomorrow. I texted back. My family forgot my birthday and is planning to kick me out so Patrick's son can have my room. They also want me to help pay for Madison's apartment in NYC. Jessica's response was immediate. That's it. You're moving out. This weekend, I'll help you. For the first time, I didn't argue or make excuses for my family. I simply replied, yes, I am. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual, avoiding another confrontation. As I drove, I called my bank to confirm that my savings were secure and sufficient for a deposit on an apartment. 6 months of secretly saving had accumulated enough for a modest start. Midway through my workday, I received a series of increasingly frantic texts from Jessica. Call me ASAP. Clarissa, seriously, call me now. Something's happening at your house. I drove by on my way to class. My hands shook as I stepped outside to return her call. What's going on? I asked as soon as she answered. There are garbage bags on your front lawn, Jessica said without preamble. A lot of them, and your mum and siblings are standing there looking at them. I think they might be your things. That's not possible, I said, though a sick feeling in my stomach told me it was not only possible, but exactly what was happening. I need to go. I told my supervisor I had a family emergency and drove home as quickly as safely possible. As I turned onto my street, I could see Jessica hadn't exaggerated. At least a dozen black garbage bags were piled near our front gate, and Mom, Madison and Jordan stood in a tight cluster on the front lawn. I parked across the street, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. As I approached, I could see that some of the bags had split open, revealing clothes I recognized as mine. What is this? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Mum stepped forward, her face set in a mask of determination. You made it very clear last night that you're unhappy here, so we decided it would be best for everyone if you moved out immediately. I stared at her in disbelief. You're throwing me out, just like that. You're 25, get out now. The words came out harsh and final. I looked at Madison and Jordan, hoping to see some sign of disagreement or discomfort with the situation. Instead, they stood slightly behind Mom Jordan, looking at his shoes, but Madison with a slight smirk on her face. You're really doing this? I asked again, still struggling to process the reality of the situation. Patrick helped us pack your things this morning before he left for work. Mum continued as if I hadn't spoken. We've been more than generous. Many parents would have insisted their children leave at 18. I walked closer to the garbage bags, noticing with growing alarm that many of my most important possessions seemed to be missing. Where's Dad's watch and my photo albums? Those things belong to the family, Mum stated firmly. They stay in the house. Dad gave me his watch on my 16th birthday. I protested, anger beginning to replace shock. And those are my photographs, my memories. We're not discussing this, Mum said, crossing her arms. You need to take your things and go, now, or we'll call the police and report you for trespassing. Trespassing, I live here. Not anymore. Madison chimed in, clearly enjoying the drama. We've already changed the locks. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. I would not cry in front of them. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Instead, I did something that clearly surprised them. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it wasn't bitter either. It was the smile of someone who suddenly sees with perfect clarity. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't a family at all, at least not for me. It was a transaction that had become unprofitable for them, so they were terminating it. Without another word, I began gathering the garbage bags and loading them into my car. Some were so hastily packed that items spilled out, including a framed photo of me with Dad that had been on my nightstand. The glass was cracked now, but I carefully placed it on my passenger seat. Madison and Jordan eventually went back inside, bored by my lack of emotional response. Mum stayed watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it guilt? Uncertainty, or just impatience for me to be gone? When my car was full and several bags still remained, I approached her one last time. I'll come back for the rest after work tomorrow. Don't bother, she said coldly. Anything left will be donated or thrown away. I nodded, accepting that I would lose whatever couldn't fit in my car. Material things could be replaced. My dignity and freedom were worth more. As I got into my car, Mum called out one final remark. When you realise how difficult it is out there on your own, don't come crawling back. I didn't respond. I simply started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and drove off without looking back. In my rearview mirror, I could see her still standing there, a solitary figure growing smaller with distance. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. With every mile between us, she would have less power over me. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I drove straight to Jessica's apartment, calling her on the way to explain what had happened. She was waiting outside when I arrived, her face a mixture of outrage on my behalf and concern for my well-being. You can stay here as long as you need, she said as she helped me carry the garbage bags inside. Thank you. I managed the reality of my situation finally hitting me. I can't believe they actually did this. I can, Jessica said grimly. Based on everything you've told me about them, I'm only surprised it didn't happen sooner. We spent the evening sorting through what had been saved and what had been lost. Most of my clothes had made it, though they were wrinkled and haphazardly packed. My laptop was there, thankfully, along with the camera Jessica had given me, but many irreplaceable items were missing: the watch from my father family photographs, a quilt my grandmother had made, and a journal I had kept since high school. The selective nature of what they had kept spoke volumes about their intention. They weren't just removing me from the house, they were erasing evidence that I had ever been part of the family. That night, lying on Jessica's couch, I felt an overwhelming mixture of emotions: sadness, anger, fear, but also surprisingly relief. The constant pressure to meet impossible expectations, to accept unfair treatment, to suppress my own needs and desires was gone. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free to make my own choices. It was a freedom I hadn't sought, but now that it had been thrust upon me, I was determined to use it well. The first week was the hardest. I would wake up disoriented momentarily, forgetting where I was and why. Then reality would come crashing back, and I would have to process the abandonment all over again. Jessica was an incredible support, never complaining about the intrusion into her space or the emotional roller coaster I was riding. She gave me the spare key to her apartment and insisted I make myself at home. The first order of business, she declared on day 3, is finding you your own place. We spent that weekend apartment hunting. My budget was limited, but I was no longer giving 75% of my income to my family, which opened up possibilities. By Sunday evening, I had signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from my office. It was nothing fancy, just a basic unit in an older building, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, mine. The landlord, an elderly man named Mr. Ramirez, seemed pleased to have a tenant with a stable job in accounting. "You seem responsible," he said as he handed me the keys. "That's rare in someone your age." I almost laughed. Responsibility had been forced on me from childhood, but for once it was working in my favour. Moving in was a sobering experience. Even with the stuff rescued from the garbage bags, I had very little. A few clothes, some basic toiletries, my laptop, and the camera from Jessica. No furniture, no kitchen supplies, not even a pillow to sleep on. Jessica helped me shop for essentials at thrift stores and discount outlets. We found a serviceable mattress, a small table with 2 chairs, and some kitchen basics. It was sparse, but it was a start. "It looks kind of sad right now," Jessica admitted as we stood in my nearly empty living room. "But think of it as a blank canvas. You can create exactly what you want here." I changed my phone number that same week. The old one had been silent, no calls or texts from my family, checking if I was safe or had a place to stay. Their silence confirmed what their actions had already told me: I was dispensable. The new number was another small step toward independence. I shared it only with Jessica, my employer, and the handful of work colleagues I was friendly with. It felt strange not to have my family able to reach me, but also liberating. With the immediate crisis of housing resolved, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, ensuring no connection to the accounts my family might know about. I updated my address everywhere from work to my driver's license. Each administrative task completed felt like another link in the chain connecting me to my past being broken. I was creating a new identity, one based on my own choices rather than others' expectations. 2 weeks after being thrown out, I did something I hadn't done in years. I signed up for a photography class. It was a weekend workshop focused on urban landscapes, something I had always wanted to explore. The instructor, Alex, was a professional photographer in his 40s, with an impressive portfolio and a teaching style that immediately put everyone at ease. When he saw my camera, the one Jessica had given me, his eyes lit up. "That's a great starter camera," he commented during a break. "Are you new to photography?" "I loved it in high school," I explained. "But I haven't had the opportunity to pursue it until now." "Well, you have a good eye," he said, looking through some of the practice shots I had taken. "You notice details others miss. That can't be taught." His encouragement gave me a boost of confidence I desperately needed. In my family, any interest outside what they deemed practical was dismissed. Having a skilled professional validate my creative instincts was profoundly affirming. The workshop introduced me to a community of fellow photography enthusiasts. We exchanged contact information and started a group chat to share images and meet up opportunities. For the first time, I was making connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. 1 month after moving into my apartment, I hung my first photograph on the wall. It was a black and white image of an abandoned factory I had shot during the workshop. Alex had helped me with the editing and printing, teaching me techniques to bring out the contrast and texture. Looking at that single-framed image on my otherwise bare wall, I felt a surge of pride. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was mine. I had created it, chosen it, and displayed it according to my own taste, not anyone else's. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had since the day I found my possessions in garbage bags. I was beginning to believe that what had initially felt like a catastrophe might actually be the best thing that had ever happened to me. The following weekend, Alex contacted me with an unexpected opportunity. One of my clients needs product photos for their website, nothing too complicated. "Would you be interested in assisting? It's paid." I accepted immediately. It wasn't much money, but the experience would be invaluable. And more importantly, it was a chance to see if photography could be more than just a hobby. Working alongside Alex, I learned more in one day than I had in the entire workshop. He showed me how to set up lighting, adjust for different materials and colors, and create consistent images that showcase the products effectively. "You're a natural at this," he commented as we were packing up. "Have you considered doing this professionally?" I laughed. "I just started taking photos again a month ago." "Everyone starts somewhere," he shrugged. "If you're interested, I could use an assistant for some upcoming projects. Part-time, of course, since you have your accounting job." I didn't hesitate. I'd love that. As spring turned to summer, I settled into a new routine. Weekdays were for my accounting job, which provided financial stability. Evenings and weekends increasingly involved photography, either assisting Alex or working on my own projects. My apartment slowly transformed from a sparse shelter to a true home. Each paycheck allowed me to add something: curtains, a comfortable chair, better kitchen equipment. I hung more of my photographs, creating a gallery wall that showcased my improving skills. Jessica visited regularly, always bringing something small for the apartment as a housewarming gift. "I'm so proud of you," she said one evening as we shared takeout on my new sofa. "Do you ever hear from your family?" "Not a word," I admitted. "It's like I never existed," she frowned. "Does that bother you?" I considered the question carefully. Sometimes. Not because I miss how they treated me, but because it confirms what I always suspected deep down. They never really loved me for me. I was valuable only as long as I was useful to them. "Their loss," Jessica declared firmly. "Look at what you're building here, a life based on your terms, pursuing your passion." She was right. Despite the hurt, despite starting over with almost nothing, I was happier than I had been in years. The constant anxiety of trying to please people who could never be pleased was gone, replaced by the simpler challenge of figuring out who I was and what I wanted. 3 months after being thrown out, I started seeing a therapist. Jessica had gently suggested it might help process the years of emotional manipulation and the abrupt separation from my family. Dr. Hayes, a compassionate woman in her 50s, helped me recognize patterns I hadn't been able to see while immersed in the toxic dynamic. "What you experienced was a form of family scapegoating," she explained. "One child is selected to bear the family's emotional burdens and serve as a convenient target for blame." Understanding the psychological framework helped me stop blaming myself. It wasn't that I wasn't lovable enough or good enough. The role I had been assigned had nothing to do with my worth as a person, and everything to do with my family's dysfunction. Each session left me feeling lighter, more certain of my path forward. I was healing, not just surviving, but beginning to thrive in my new independence. 6 months after that life-changing day when I drove away from garbage bags containing my possessions, I held my first photography exhibition at a small local gallery. It wasn't a solo show, but part of a group exhibition of emerging photographers that Alex had helped organize. I had 5 images in the show, all exploring themes of abandonment and renewal. Urban landscapes where nature was reclaiming industrial spaces, objects weathered by time, but still beautiful compositions that found hope in decay. The opening night was more successful than any of us had anticipated. A local arts reporter attended and wrote a piece for the newspaper, including an image of me standing beside my photographs. The article mentioned my name and background as an accountant who had discovered a passion for photography. I didn't think anything of it until 2 days later when my phone began buzzing with text notifications. 60 messages, all from the same unknown number. I almost deleted them without reading, assuming they were spam, until I saw the first few words, "Clarissa, it's Mom, please." My heart raced as I scrolled through the messages, watching their tone evolve from demanding to pleading. "Clarissa, it's Mom, please call me, we need to talk." "Why are you ignoring me? This is childish. I saw your picture in the paper. Call me immediately. This has gone on long enough. It's time to stop punishing the family. Patrick says you're being manipulative by not responding. Madison misses you. She asks about you. Jordan is struggling without you here. The house doesn't feel right without you. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Please, Clarissa, where are you? Are you safe? I'm sorry. Please just let me know you're okay." The messages continued growing increasingly desperate. The final one, sent just minutes before I checked my phone, simply said, "I miss you." I sat on my sofa staring at the screen, a storm of emotions washing over me. 6 months of silence, and now this flood of messages. Why now? What had changed? The answer came later that day in the form of a text from Madison, also from an unknown number. "Mum and Patrick are fighting all the time about money. He lost his job 3 months ago and they're behind on bills. Jordan had to get a job at the grocery store and hates it. Everything's falling apart. Please call Mom." So that was it. The family was struggling financially without my contribution. The irony was almost painful. They had discarded me when they thought Patrick's income was secure, and now they wanted me back when that security had vanished. I didn't respond to either of them immediately. Instead, I called Dr. Hayes and scheduled an emergency session to process this unexpected development. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I explained the situation. Not what do you think you should do or what would make them happy, but what do you want? It was a simple question, but a profound one. For most of my life, what I wanted hadn't been a consideration. My role had been to facilitate what others wanted. "I don't want to go back to that house or that dynamic," I said slowly. "But I think I might want some kind of relationship with them eventually, on my terms." Dr. Hayes nodded. "That's a healthy perspective. You can reconnect without reverting to old patterns, but take your time, set clear boundaries, and remember how far you've come." That evening, as I was editing photos from a recent shoot, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Jessica always texted before visiting. Cautiously, I looked through the peephole. My mother stood in the hallway, looking older and more tired than I remembered. My first instinct was not to answer, to pretend I wasn't home, but I had spent 6 months building strength and self-respect. I could face her without being pulled back into the old dynamic. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Jessica," she admitted. "I went to her apartment looking for you. She wouldn't tell me anything at first, but when I kept coming back, she finally gave me your address. She said it was up to you whether to let me in or not." I made a mental note to talk to Jessica about this, but I couldn't be angry with her. She had been my rock through everything, and if she had given my mother my address, she must have had a reason. "What do you want, Mum?" She looked down at her hands, which were fidgeting with her purse strap. "Can I come in just to talk?" I considered refusing, but something in her demeanour stopped me. This wasn't the confident, dismissive woman who had stood by while my belongings were thrown out in garbage bags. This was someone humbled by circumstance. For a few minutes, I agreed, stepping aside. She entered cautiously, looking around my apartment with evident surprise. Perhaps she had expected me to be living in squalor, unable to function without the family. Instead, she saw a clean, comfortable space decorated with my photographs and personal touches. "You've done well for yourself," she commented, sounding genuinely impressed. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." We sat at my small dining table, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Madison and Jordan?" I finally asked. "They're okay. It's been challenging. Patrick lost his job, the economy, you know." She waved her hand vaguely. "We've had to make adjustments." "I saw your texts," I said. "All 60 of them." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "I wasn't sure you'd get them. Your old number wasn't working." "I changed it the week after you threw me out." She winced at my blunt description. "About that, it wasn't supposed to happen that way. Patrick was angry after our argument and things escalated. By the time I realized how wrong it was, you were gone." I didn't point out that she had 6 months to reach this conclusion, or that she had been standing right there actively participating in my expulsion. Instead, I asked the question that mattered most to me. "Why are you here now, Mom? What do you want from me?" She sighed heavily. "Honestly, at first I wanted to ask if you could help us financially until Patrick finds another job. That's what he sent me to do." Her frankness was unexpected. "And now that I'm sitting here seeing how well you're doing without us, I'm just sad. I've missed so much of your life. This apartment, your photography in the paper. You've created all this on your own." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I don't expect you to forgive us right away," she said. "What we did was wrong, but maybe we could start again somehow, get to know each other as adults." It wasn't an apology, not really. There was no acknowledgement of the years of unfair treatment, the double standards, the exploitation of my labor and income. Just a vague admission that throwing me out had been wrong, and a suggestion that we start again. "I'm not moving back," I said firmly, "and I'm not going to start supporting the family financially again." "I understand," she said quickly, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. "But I continued, "I'd be willing to meet occasionally, coffee or lunch in a public place. We can see how it goes from there." The relief on her face was evident. "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Clarissa." "Atene-san." As she stood to leave, she paused by the wall of photographs. "These are beautiful. You always did have an eye for detail, even as a little girl." It was such a small thing, this recognition of an aspect of myself that had nothing to do with my usefulness to the family. Yet it affected me deeply. Perhaps there was hope for some kind of relationship after all, one based on seeing each other as we truly were, rather than the roles we had played. "I'll call you," I said as I showed her out. "Not right away, but soon." She nodded, accepting my terms without argument, another sign of how much had changed. "I'll look forward to it." After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing the encounter. I felt neither triumph nor defeat, just a calm certainty that I was on the right path. The road to healing would be long, with many conversations more difficult than this one, but I was ready for the journey. 1 year after finding my possessions in garbage bags at the gate, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I had reduced my hours at the accounting firm to part-time, allowing me to pursue photography more seriously. With Alex's mentorship, I had built up a small but growing client base for portrait and product photography. I had even taken the leap to rent a small studio space, sharing the cost with 2 other photographers. Having a dedicated place to work outside my apartment gave legitimacy to my business and allowed me to take on more professional projects. My relationship with my family had evolved cautiously. Regular coffee meetings with Mum had gradually revealed the extent of the financial problems at home. Patrick had eventually found another job, but at a significantly lower salary. Madison had completed her master's program, but struggled to find work in her field and moved back home. Jordan had been forced to take a full-time job at the grocery store, a reality check he deeply resented. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer the family scapegoat or piggy bank, but an independent adult, choosing to maintain contact on my own terms. It wasn't always easy. Old patterns tried to reassert themselves, especially when financial pressures mounted. "Couldn't you help just this one time?" Mom would sometimes ask when a bill came due that they couldn't cover. Family helps family. "I am helping," I would respond calmly, by encouraging everyone to stand on their own feet the way I had to. My boundaries remained firm, though not punitive. When Jordan expressed interest in photography after seeing my work, I offered to teach him the basics. When Madison needed help revising her resume, I spent an afternoon providing feedback. These were gifts freely given, not obligations or transactions. I even had dinner with all of them occasionally, though I always drove my own car and had a predetermined time to leave. Jessica had taught me that technique, calling it my escape hatch. Always have an exit strategy, she advised. It changes the whole dynamic when you know you can leave whenever you choose. My relationship with Madison and Jordan slowly improved as they began to recognize the unfairness of our childhood roles. Without me there to handle everything, they had been forced to develop skills and take on responsibilities they had previously avoided. I never realized how much you did around the house, Madison admitted during one of our infrequent sisterly lunches. Mom has me doing half of what you used to, and I'm exhausted. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. Small steps. Patrick remained distant, our interactions limited to brief greetings when I visited the house. His pride had been wounded by his job loss and the family's subsequent dependence on the very person he had helped throw out. We would likely never have a warm relationship, but we had reached a state of cold civility. The most significant development in my life, however, had nothing to do with my family of origin. It was the creation of a chosen family, a network of friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. Jessica remained my closest friend, her apartment still my second home. Alex had become both mentor and friend, introducing me to opportunities and people in the photography world. And there was Michael, a client who had hired me to take promotional photos for his small business and ended up becoming something more. Our relationship had developed slowly, both of us cautious for different reasons. He was divorced and wary of commitment. I was still learning what healthy attachment looked like. But there was a gentle understanding between us, a recognition of each other's wounds, and a mutual desire to heal rather than harm. On the anniversary of my expulsion from my family home, Michael and I had dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, not far from my studio. He didn't know the significance of the date, I hadn't told him, but the timing felt right. I have some news, I said as we finished our meal. I've been offered a position teaching a photography course at the community centre. It's just once a week, but it's a start. That's fantastic, he said, his smile genuine. You'll be an amazing teacher. There's more, I continued, nervous but excited. Remember that series of photographs I've been working on, the abandoned spaces? A gallery in Philadelphia wants to show them. A real gallery, not just a group show. His expression of pride and pleasure warmed me. This was what support looked like, I realized. Not conditional approval based on how I could serve someone else's needs, but genuine happiness for my success, because it made me happy. Later that evening, walking back to my apartment hand in hand, I reflected on the journey of the past year. From garbage bags on the curb to a photography exhibition in Philadelphia. From emotional manipulation to authentic connection. From survival to growth. The path hadn't been easy or straight. There had been nights of tears and doubt, moments of anger so intense I could barely breathe, periods of grief, for the family relationships I had wanted but never truly had. But there had also been discoveries of strength I didn't know I possessed, of talents I had suppressed, of the capacity to build a life aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. Sometimes the family you're born into teaches you what love isn't, so you can recognize what love truly is when you build your own life. And in that recognition lies the greatest freedom of all. If my story resonates with you in any way, please leave a comment below, sharing what part spoke to you the most. Have you ever had to rebuild your life or set boundaries with family? I'd love to hear your experiences. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the most difficult endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings.